President Trump says he wants to reopen Alcatraz, the notorious prison turned tourist destination in the middle of the San Francisco Bay. It once housed some of the most dangerous criminals in America, including President Trump's favorite gangster, Al Capone.
Did anybody ever hear of the great Alphonse Capone? Al Capone, great head of the mafia, right? If he had dinner with you and if he didn't like the way you smiled at him at dinner, he would kill you. You'd be dead by the time you walked out of the nice restaurant. Al Capone was so mean that if you went to dinner with him and he didn't like you, you'd be dead the next morning. The Alphonse Capone, the great Alphonse Capone, legendary Scarface, was attacked only a tiny fraction of what Trump was attacked.
The Rock, as it's sometimes called, shut down 60 years ago because of maintenance and cost concerns, but President Trump calls it a symbol of law and order and says he is ordering the Justice Department to open it back up. Quote, "When we were a more serious nation in times past, we did not hesitate to lock up the most dangerous criminals and keep them far away from anyone they could harm." He tied it to his immigration agenda, saying, "We will no longer be held hostage to criminals, thugs, and judges that are afraid to do their job and allow us to remove criminals who came into our country illegally." My smart reporters are back. Alphonse Capone, any excuse to run some of those sound bites? No. Listen, I also, as we start this discussion, do want to say that the Bureau of Prisons just released a statement saying that they are going to vigorously pursue all avenues to support and implement the president's agenda, and they're going to start assessing it. This is a prison that was closed because it was deemed too expensive to keep operating. That was back in 1963. It's nearly 3 times as expensive as other federal prisons, only holds around 300 prisoners. And by the way, what is now a National Historic Landmark has more than 1 million visitors each year. Casey?
Well, one of the things that we've learned about President Trump is that symbolism often trumps sense, right? He is very...
Sense, S-E-N-S-E-N-C-E-N-T-S.
Trumpism. Exactly.
There were so many puns in there.
But look, he likes how this looks. He likes the message that it sends. He thinks, it's clear he seems to think that it underscores his own political brand, that he's going to be tough. He's going to find the kind of person that should be in Alcatraz, regardless of how much it costs or whether it would be easier to do it somewhere else. We saw this with the building of the wall in his first term, right? I mean, how many members of Congress were willing to support the idea that there should be additional barriers on the border? But they all kind of universally agreed that his idea of the big, beautiful wall was actually the most expensive and least effective way to go about doing it. Didn't mean that's not what he wanted to do, though.
I mean, if they go down this route, he's going to expect probably a fight from Democrats. Nancy Pelosi called it not a serious proposal. Of course, she's a San Francisco Democrat. Gavin Newsom sort of laughed it off. It's going to be expensive. I mean, what happened to the time of Doge and trying to figure out ways to cut back? Now we're talking about getting Alcatraz back up and running, which would require a significant amount of maintenance, let alone just running the prison, just rebuilding the prison so it can actually house criminals.
Transportation to and from the prison.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
exactly.
a lot there.
They're talking about this. They're talking about military parades that cost tens of millions of dollars. So
yeah,
it kind of undercuts the whole idea of budget cutting.
So it's got quite a history, frankly. So I think we're going to do that, and we're looking at it right now.
Group chat is back. I want to talk about that idea of the symbol, because I think the president cares a lot about symbols.
What it looks like, yeah. I think that a lot of his presidency and how he really talks to his base is doing these, what I like to call, not necessarily just performative, but things that look as if he's in charge, and he says that he's in charge. Alcatraz, I think, for many people, is a place to go and visit and have some fun with your family.
It is a tourist attraction.
It's a tourist attraction.
Point, yeah. And in fact, if you go to the website, I think, they say, like, it had to be closed because it was so expensive to maintain.
And to me, it doesn't make sense if we're trying to save money too. Why reopen such a thing that would cost more money, like billions of dollars, to keep it running? It makes no sense.
At a time when you're sending a scythe through the federal government to save money, opening it doesn't make sense. But I think you're right. It's a symbol. It makes Trump look tough, and it's probably one of those things which he says very deliberately for effect, and they probably are never going to end up happening. He probably doesn't think it's ever going to happen,
Sure.
but he
But
gets
this
the
sounds
points for
good.
saying it in the moment.
Yeah, send.
Was that your typing?
I'm on Twitter.
This is a way to maintain brand, right? People trust Donald Trump to be tough on crime. This is a vernacular way to enunciate that. He's talking in the language that regular Americans would talk about, and he's not going to reopen Alcatraz, but he is going to be tough on crime, and that's what he's saying.
Lawrence Correctional Facility, one of the 17 Supermax facilities out in Colorado, for instance, where they continue to face an overwhelming number of inmates to guards that are able to effectively oversee these facilities. And yet what you're hearing from the president and his desire to open up a new facility on Alcatraz, the specifics of it are not clear, and the White House has not provided any details about how they would fund or effectively rebuild this facility that closed down more than 60 years ago. But here was the president talking about it last night.
So many of these radicalized judges, they want to have trials for every single, think of it, every single person that's in our country illegally, that came in illegally. That would mean millions of trials, and it's just so ridiculous what's happening. And it's long been a symbol, Alcatraz, of whatever it is. I mean, you know, it's a sad symbol, but it's a symbol of law and order.
Now, of course, we heard him rebuff the idea of potentially due process for undocumented individuals in the country. His own Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller, here just today in a social media post, suggested that undocumented individuals are not guaranteed due process in the Constitution. It's very explicit that due process is guaranteed for all persons. It doesn't say citizens specifically here, but what you have is the president seeking to detain and incarcerate or deport more individuals than what the system currently allows for, and at the pace that he does not desire.
And Donna, if you go back to when they closed Alcatraz back in 1963, there were two main reasons. One, it was falling apart and it was going to cost an awful lot of money in dollars at that time to repair it. And number two, it was really expensive to run. They had to fly everything in there. They had to fly in food, even drinkable water. You have to get staff in and off of it, right? So there's no clear idea, as Vaughn points out, how much this might cost. So even if it was a serious proposal, how do you make that proposal at a time when what you're saying to America is, I'm going to save you money?
Well, look, I mean, the president of the United States, one, doesn't consider the cost, but he thinks it's actually more important for Americans to pay 140% more on consumer goods than it is to put that into the cost of running an Alcatraz. Alcatraz was incredibly expensive, not just the maintenance that needed to bring it up to scale in the 21st century, but the ongoing maintenance as a facility. It only ever housed about 300 persons there anyway. And so it's just not workable. And I don't think it's a serious proposal. I think it's another one of these things where the rest of us were doing something on Sunday evening and the president of the United States was consumed by Alcatraz. So it doesn't make sense financially. It is not workable as a prison facility. And the worst of the worst, frankly, are housed in our state prisons and not in the federal system. So this is really not a serious proposal at all.
So what it does bring up, though, Stuart, because when the president brought up this idea of reopening Alcatraz, he said basically the same thing he said to Kristen Welker about people facing deportation, which is that there's no way you can give all these people a hearing. There's no way he clearly thinks that the worst of the worst should necessarily have to go through due process. So not a political issue, but a practical issue. Is that message going to fly among even Republicans?
Well, look, let me just point out that Escape from Alcatraz was playing on television where Trump was this weekend. And it's clearly what happened is this guy saw Escape from Alcatraz and then grabbed his phone and started tweeting, we ought to reopen Alcatraz. I mean, next time we're having a big issue with Ukraine, we should show Red Dawn with the Russians invading Colorado. And he'll probably give the Ukrainian nuclear weapons. You know, he treats the Constitution as sort of like a course that he's taken, and he can just skip certain classes, and it doesn't matter. This is just nutty. And it's very, very dangerous. And you know what really breaks my heart as a guy who helped elect a lot of these people who are up there? Why is it that no Republican senators are speaking out for the Constitution? If there was one conservative idea, it was to protect the Constitution and to try to follow the Constitution. And that has just been thrown out the window. The Republican Party's become this sort of radical movement that has no coherent governing philosophy, and this is where you end up.
Well, what Donna, he promised was mass deportations, right? And that hasn't happened. We did see, for example, 1,100 people picked up in Florida as part of an operation at the end of April. But this has not been the kind of nationwide headlines that I think the White House suggested that there might be. Is that why we're hearing all this tough talk, put him in Alcatraz, sort of in lieu of results?
Well, I mean, I think, everybody knows that this proposal, or at least people who are sane, know that the proposal to gather up so-called illegal immigrants and deport them was always a harebrained scheme. And so now he has to invent another reason to be. Now, I'm the law and order president when he doesn't have anything else to show for it. Unfortunately, American citizens, people who are here legally, people who are not gang members are being swept up.
Alcatraz scheme is failing already, and it's failing because it exposes the nut jobbery of the Trump regime, and it also exposes the fact that he's not really trying to build a better society for Americans. He's not trying to approach immigration policy with maybe a firmer but still humane, aspect, right? Remember, Trump wants it both ways. He wants his base to think that he's going to be a cruel mass deportation guy, but he wanted the swing voter, the people that actually make him president, right? Because the MAGA base didn't make him president, right? Swing voters did. He wanted them to think that, he's going to be humane, he's going to be reasonable. He wanted people to believe that he was going to be little different than Joe Biden in many ways, except that he was just going to get rid of more people somehow through magic, without being mean about it. But when you go and you open up one of the most notorious prisons in human history, it really is, when you think about it, I'm not saying it's the most notorious, but in the grand scheme of human history, when you think of notorious prisons for how they mistreated people, for how they harken back to a time where people had less rights and freedoms, also the famousness of the people locked up there, all of that. Alcatraz is up there, one of the most infamous prisons. And it showcases that Trump is, one, stuck in the past, two, obsessed with punishment and retribution instead of justice. And those are different things. Retribution, punishment, maybe those can be parts of a justice system, but they shouldn't be the main thrust of it in a democratic decent society. And so Trump's plan here instantly exposes him. Instantly. By planning, even if it doesn't end up happening, and I don't think it's necessarily going to end up happening, but even by planning it, it exposes Trump to be the out-of-touch, cruel dictator that he's always been.